In the autumn of 1876, a gruesome discovery was made by railroad workers in the remote hills of southwestern Missouri. While laying track, they unearthed the foundation of a burnt-out farmhouse. Beneath it, they found 17 human skeletons meticulously arranged in rows. Each skeleton was missing specific bones, femurs, ribs, and skulls, which had been removed with chilling, surgical precision. The horror of the scene was compounded by the items found alongside the remains: brass medical instruments and a leather-bound journal. This journal detailed 3 years of horrific experiments conducted by its author, Dr. Cornelius Endecott, on a practice he termed therapeutic anthropophagy, the medicinal consumption of human flesh. The Missouri State Medical Board immediately moved to seal all records. The local sheriff was ordered from the state capital, Jefferson City, to officially classify the incident as a catastrophic fire with multiple casualties. For nearly 5 decades, the truth about Dr. Endecott's private sanatorium remained as buried as his victims. However, through recently uncovered correspondence and survivor testimonies that miraculously escaped destruction, the full, terrifying reality of the atrocities committed at Endecott Farm can finally be revealed. This discovery was merely the epilogue to a story that began in 1873, in a region still deeply scarred by the recent Civil War. Southwestern Missouri, an area torn between Confederate sympathies and Union occupation, had been a hotbed of brutal guerrilla warfare. Towns like Carthage and Joplin were slowly rebuilding, but the countryside was littered with abandoned homesteads and haunted by men carrying invisible psychological wounds that contemporary medicine was powerless to heal. Into this broken landscape arrived Dr. Cornelius Endecott. He presented impeccable credentials, a graduate of Harvard Medical School and a commended field surgeon with the 14th Massachusetts Infantry. However, those who knew him noted a disturbing change in his demeanor after the horrific Battle of Antietam, where he had worked for 3 straight days in a field hospital more resembling a charnel house. After the war, he spent 2 years in Europe, ostensibly studying advanced techniques. His letters home spoke enthusiastically of revolutionary European treatments for soldier's heart, now known as PTSD, particularly German theories on dietary interventions and cryptic Swiss essence therapies. In the spring of 1873, Endecott purchased 320 acres of abandoned farmland northeast of Carthage. His plan to establish a private facility for treating war-related nervous disorders was initially met with gratitude by locals. He arrived with his wife, Helena, a former battlefield nurse, and their well-educated 18-year-old daughter, Margaret, who would serve as his assistant. The facility, Endecott Farm, opened in August 1873, advertising in newspapers across Missouri, Kansas, and Arkansas. It promised discreet, comfortable accommodations and advanced European methods for wealthy families seeking alternatives to conventional asylum care. Well-dressed clients, merchants, plantation owners, former officers, began arriving by rail and private carriage, paying substantial fees for Endecott's promised groundbreaking treatments. Among the first patients was Samuel Ridgefield, a former Union captain suffering from severe nightmares and violent fits. His family paid a $500 fee for a 3-month program. His last optimistic letter home mentioned unusual but scientifically sound treatments. After that, communication ceased, replaced only by brief, formal progress reports from Endecott himself. This pattern would repeat itself with other patients. The first external sign of trouble came in the spring of 1874. Martha Cunningham, the widow of a lumber merchant, grew suspicious when personal letters from her son, Lieutenant Thomas Cunningham, a patient for 7 months, stopped abruptly. She made an unannounced visit to the farm. From the moment she arrived, she felt a sense of profound wrongness. A sweet, cloying smell hung in the air. Dr. Endecott greeted her with blood-stained clothes and residue under his fingernails, which he dismissed as evidence of an emergency procedure. His eyes held a fervent, fanatical intensity. He refused her request to see her son, citing a critical transformation phase that required complete isolation. He instead showed her detailed, jargon-filled notes about dietary interventions and essence therapies. As Martha prepared to leave, frustrated and uneasy, she heard a chilling sound from deep within the house, a human voice, raised in what could have been either laughter or a scream, that was abruptly cut off. Endecott dismissed it as an emotional release from a healing breakthrough, but Martha was certain it was her son's voice. On her way out, her driver, a local farmer named Josiah Brennan, casually noted an unusually large number of graves in the facility's small cemetery for an operation less than a year old. Driven by maternal terror, Martha began a private investigation. She discovered that at least 6 other families had also stopped receiving personal letters, getting only Endecotts clinical reports instead. Some families had moved away, others refused to discuss their experiences. Her breakthrough came when she connected with Virginia Prescott, the sister of another patient, Jonathan Prescott. Comparing notes, they uncovered a horrifying pattern: families were still paying monthly fees long after their loved ones' personal correspondence had ceased. Worse, by cross-referencing obituaries, they found that at least 12 men who had been patients were already buried in cemeteries across 3 states, their families never notified. They were paying to treat corpses. The transformation of Endecott Farm from a place of healing to a house of horrors had been a methodical descent, meticulously documented in the doctor's journal. It began with a genuine desire to help, but his European studies, particularly the work of a controversial German physician named Dr. Klaus Hartmann, twisted his methods. Hartmann theorized that mental illness stemmed from deficiencies in primal nutrients only obtainable from human tissue. Endecott's first experiment involved secretly adding tissue, obtained from a corrupt local mortician named Benjamin Strew, to Samuel Ridgefield's food. When Samuel showed apparent improvement, likely due to time and rest, not cannibalism, Endecott became emboldened. He gradually incorporated the substance into all his patients' meals, eventually convincing his reluctant wife, Helena, that they were medical pioneers. When the mortician supply proved insufficient, Endecott escalated. After a patient, Lieutenant Marcus Thornburg, died naturally, Endecott used the opportunity to harvest organs and tissue, reporting the death as a heart attack and burying a eviscerated shell. With a supply of fresh tissue, his experiments intensified. The final, irrevocable step into absolute evil was triggered by the arrival of Jonathan Prescott, a severely traumatized artillery officer. When Prescott failed to improve with the standard essence therapy, Endecott, guided by his twisted interpretation of Hartmann's work, decided that only the freshest tissue from a living subject would suffice. He murdered his first success story, Samuel Ridgefield, with a fatal dose of morphine, documenting the act in his journal as a merciful release and a necessary step to obtain optimal specimens. Prescott received a meal prepared from Samuel's remains. His violent episode ceased almost overnight, replaced by a profound, unsettling calm. This was not recovery, but a complete psychological break, a choice for madness over the unbearable reality. He began writing strangely philosophical letters home about understanding the deeper connections between all living things. By October 1874, the facility housed 8 patients, all unknowingly participating in a horrific cycle of consumption. But Martha Cunningham and Virginia Prescott had pieced together enough evidence to act. Martha returned to Endecott Farm, accompanied by her brother-in-law, Judge William Cunningham, and Sheriff's Deputy Robert Hayes. Endecott met them with desperate, frantic objections, but his authority could not stop them. Upon entering, the foul odor was overwhelming. As Endecott gave contradictory excuses for why they couldn't see the patients, a muffled scream from the basement galvanized Deputy Hayes into action. He placed Endecott under arrest and ordered an immediate search. The basement laboratory revealed the full, methodical horror. It was divided into rooms, a surgical chamber with restraints and bloody instruments, a processing lab with grinding and cooking equipment to transform human tissue into food, and a holding area where the 3 surviving patients, including Thomas Cunningham and Jonathan Prescott, were found alive but psychologically destroyed. They had been so completely broken and indoctrinated that they craved the good food and spoke of their experience as a transformative healing communion, their original personalities erased. The investigation revealed that over 18 months, 23 men had been patients. 17 had been murdered and processed for consumption, their deaths hidden from families who continued to pay. The remaining 6 had been transformed into willing participants in Endecott's cannibalistic system. Perhaps most disturbingly, correspondence was found with other physicians in several states expressing keen interest in his dietary intervention protocols, suggesting his influence may have extended beyond his own farm. At his trial, held in secret to prevent public panic, Endecott mounted a sophisticated defense, insisting his work was legitimate, revolutionary medical science oppressed by prejudice. The testimony of the broken survivors and the damning evidence from his own journal convicted him. He was found guilty on 17 counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Helena Endecott was convicted as an accessory. Their daughter, Margaret, psychologically shattered, disappeared into a new life under a changed name. The 3 survivors never recovered, living out their days in asylums, forever haunted by their forced participation in the horrors of Endecott Farm. The case sent shockwaves through the nation, leading to major reforms in medical licensing, oversight of private facilities, and the development of modern medical ethics. It exposed the vulnerability of traumatized veterans and the desperate lengths families would go to for a cure. The farm was burned to the ground in 1877 as a public health measure, and the land was eventually made a state forest, though visitors for decades reported an inexplicable sense of unease. Dr. Cornelius Endecott died in prison in 1889, never expressing remorse and still believing history would vindicate him. His case remains one of the most disturbing in American history, not merely for the crimes themselves, but for the terrifying demonstration of how authority, pseudoscience, and self-deception can combine to create systematic evil, transforming the noble promise of healing into an unspeakable reality of horror.